the ones that are more closely aligned to the corporate strategy, those are the critical initiatives. And the ones that, there'll be, other stuff happening, but if it's not, laser aligned with the corporate strategy, then you should be putting less resource into it.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on. Okay. Cool. So I'll just pause and then we'll go into it. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to be joined by one of our, I'm going to say regular guests because you have been on before. That means you are a regular guest now, Richard. Richard Jeffers is joining us. We had a really great episode in the past, but today we're actually talking about predictive maintenance. Maybe not too much of a surprise, but actually, the topic's actually, it's a way of life and not just a technology, which I think you did a presentation on this recently, Richard. Correct, so we're going to just sort of dive into that, the content of that. But it's something we've talked about a lot within Siemens as well. So the emphasis on, not the emphasis shouldn't be, just on the technology change, but actually the people change and the cultural change, let's say, that's required. But before we dive into it, Richard, it might be good just to remind people or new listeners who you are, what you're doing at the moment, all that kind of thing.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me back, Niall. It's always good to talk to the gang at Siemens. I think this is my third time now, but my first time as an independent. For the last 4 months, I've been running my own small asset management consultancy focused on capex, maintenance strategy, and industrial data.
Excellent, and welcome back. So I must have. I've interviewed so many people, I forget how many times people have been on, but that's a good reminder. Thank you very much for that. So let's open the topic up straight away. So what do we mean by this concept of predictive maintenance being a way of life and not a technology? So just to start the conversation.
I think, the world has known for at least 40 years the principles of predictive maintenance. Since Nolan and Heap did their seminal work in the aviation sector, we've understood the concept of failure curves. We've understood the concept of the P2F interval and the importance of collecting leading indicators of failure and responding to those. But actually, despite having known this for 40 odd years, many businesses are still, striving towards an aspiration of predictive maintenance. And for me, that's because of, cultural or challenges, or, cultural ways of working challenges they've got in their business. They're not being data-led organisations. So whilst, both, the Senseye PDM platform and others are fantastic at processing that data, if you don't have that culture of responding to data, then actually it does just become technology rather than something creating value.
And so I guess you sort of touched on the question I was just about to ask, but I guess, in a wider digital transformation program that, there's lots of different technologies and things like that. So I guess the question is, why do people see PDM as sort of, as a software tool and not this sort of, wider initiative, let's say?
I think, people are, struggling. A lot of organisations are struggling to build a coherent maintenance strategy and understanding all the different things that need to go together to drive that improvement in uptime. It is about, predictive maintenance and condition monitoring, but it's also about work planning. It's also about storeroom planning. It's about the ability to write really high quality work orders in your CMS. There's lots and lots of things that have got to happen simultaneously to move yourself up the maintenance maturity journey. There isn't a shortcut that says you can, technology way you're out of that problem. If you don't have an efficiently run storeroom, you can respond really quickly to the alerts that a condition monitoring's creating, but you're still going to have a really long mean time to repair because that spare part that you need is not available. And that's just one example of all the bits need to come together at the same time, rather than just one slice of that challenge.
So I guess what we're saying here, there needs to be a maintenance strategy. That, I mean, and maybe it sounds obvious, saying it out loud, but maybe it's not so obvious to people on the ground with busy, busy day-to-day lives. But you really need a maintenance strategy to lay the groundwork for technologies like predictive maintenance and others.
Absolutely, and not just a maintenance strategy, but a maintenance strategy that's keyed into your corporate strategy. I talk to a lot of maintenance engineers who go, how do we persuade the board, to invest in maintenance, or how do we persuade the exec to invest in maintenance? And one of my questions is, when was the last time you read the annual report? Do you understand what your business is trying to achieve, what the corporate goals are? Because maintenance is not an end in itself. It's an enabler to deliver your corporate, commercial, and brand strategy. So really, like everything else in maintenance, it's got to start with that strategic plan, and then cascade its way down through all the different elements. And then, of course, investment in condition monitoring and predictive maintenance should play, an important part in that strategic plan.
And I guess, we talk about this, this connection between, departments. You mentioned sort of, the corporate strategy down to the maintenance team, but it's sort of a cross organisation as well. And you mentioned also, sort of earlier, at the beginning of this episode about, culture as well. So how does sort of culture impact the success or failure of predictive maintenance? And maybe you could refer to that example you were giving, that sort of disconnect between the corporate strategy and what people are doing, on the shop floor, for example.
Yeah, I think so. So there's probably, there's a couple of things there. I mean, the disconnect on culture, if you've got a culture where you're rewarding the heroes for responding to firefighting, and meanwhile, ignoring the people in the back room who are busy building data models and respond to that data, then actually people are never going to, value the work that's done preventing failure. I did some work in a food factory a few years back, and they were absolutely trapped into a reactive cycle. All the cultural triggers, all the emotional reward mechanisms were all focused towards the heroes, in inverted commas, who turned up at 2 a.m. to get the factory back up and running again. Meanwhile, there was a young lady, in the corner who was busy, looking at data and going, we need to do something now to stop this failure. But actually, everybody was too busy running around fighting fires to go and respond to the data that this young lady was generating that would have stopped those fires light in the first place. And in a lot of ways, that business just didn't see maintenance as part of the corporate strategy. It felt maintenance existed, separate to everything else. And I hear a lot about the business won't invest in maintenance. The business won't give us the money we need. But I feel that so often maintenance professionals don't communicate the risk and benefit of investment in maintenance. Maintenance is an insurance policy. And like all other insurance policies, it's a choice. So, you can make a choice to run to fail, or you can just run to fail. One of those is a strategy, and one of those is a failure. So if you've chosen, based on my corporate strategy, based on my criticality analysis, that run to fail is the right approach for this asset, fantastic, absolutely the right thing to do. What's not acceptable is if you've not made that choice because you've not understood the importance your assets play in delivering the corporate strategy.
Yeah, and so I think what we're saying is there's often sort of a disconnect between the two. There's this big maybe like information void or understanding between the two. Two very very different sets of stakeholders as well.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested by that idea that firefighting is seen as success. I guess because I could almost imagine in my head as a way of technology solving issues. So it's so quiet. But not to say everything's solved by technology, but it's a lot quieter. So it's sort of there's almost suspicion, like because everything's running so smoothly, maybe with additional technology, that there's almost a bit of suspicion around technology if you've got that sort of mindset.
I think I've probably not seen that, Niall, that suspicion around technology. I've just seen the challenge of getting businesses to create the headspace for structured improvements in maintenance as opposed to reacting to it. And it's really easy to see, activity being done by people responding to failures. It's much harder to see the activity that's done by the people who are ensuring those failures never happen in the first place. The team that invest in making sure the work orders are correctly written, so that the right inspection standards are there, that they've got a really robust condition monitoring strategy, so they know which assets to go and look at, and they've got a really well-run spare parts organisation, so that the required spare parts are always there when they need them, but not when they don't need them. That's all very calm, quiet, and actually, under the radar stuff. And it's not, in a lot of organisations, it's just not seen and rewarded, because that activity of being reactive is, of course, highly visible.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can say, "Oh, I saved this major breakdown." It's like big headline news in your face, rather than the quiet work going on in the background, where it's like, we're pointing you to this issue which I fixed proactively. Doesn't quite have the same shine to it, but obviously has an amazing impact. So is it a case, I guess, as well, of being able to sell these successes better internally, or teams need to be equipped to be able to sell better internally?
I'm going to go back to that alignment with the corporate strategy, Niall, because for me this is absolutely fundamental. And if you look at the principles of ISO 55000 and the concept of the strategic asset management plan, that's really clear that maintenance exists within a corporate context. So if you understand that actually we've got to deliver, this thing, and that requires an availability of X, Y, Z. Then it's down to the maintenance function to define how they achieve that availability, and that's clearly our job as maintenance professionals. But actually, we can't define what's the right availability for our organisations. That needs to play its part in a broader strategy. In a previous life, I worked for Heineken. And breweries were there to deliver a brand strategy and make sure that we had stock available on the shelves at the right points in time. If you had a failure of your packaging in the run up to Christmas, that was big news. And we saw it with Diageo last year, with the breweries running, pubs running out of Guinness. But what would be great to unpack there was what was the mean time between failures and the mean time to repair that was sitting below some of those numbers, and actually that's a really good example of where actually, if you want to achieve X percentage availability of your products on shelves during peak trading, you can cover that partly by stock, but that's quite an expensive way to cover it, or you can cover it through high availability and high repairability, which is clearly a cheaper way to achieve that same product availability in shelf. So you can imagine now in the Diageo business, people looking at why did we run out of product during that peak trading, and what are the actions we need to do differently next year in order to ensure that we don't see that repeat itself.
And it's interesting. So I guess if you talk about reactive strategy, you can see the success quite clearly. You make the repair things back up and running. But I guess what we're also saying is, yes, you've repaired it, but that you can't investigate, why it happened, where you can improve next time, the underlying data, reasons underneath that, right?
Yeah, and that's back to the cultural, issues again, because if you've structured problem solving, is a culture thing. The desire to prioritize structured problem solving. Again, if you sit in a highly reactive organisation, you go from one fire to another fire, and you never stop to go, why is my factory bursting into flames, all the time? And actually, that structured problem solving at the end of each failure, is massively important, because those failures won't have just happened. We all know that only 17% of failures are time related. The other 83% of failures are caused by non-time related failures. So all of those non-time related failures, there can be a conditional inspection that will help you anticipate and therefore mitigate the impact of that failure. But you need the culture to want to build those. And once you've got the culture, then yes, you can have the software tools to help you do that at scale.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But even if we consider, that, there are obviously many organisations, ready have the mindset, for using data-led approaches and predictive maintenance to do that. But then when they look at the market, which obviously Senseye is a part of, but look at the market as a whole, we know that there's lots of different providers saying they do predictive maintenance, or they do AI, or they do, is it condition monitoring, is it predictive maintenance? And it's a very confused, market we're in, and which I guess leads also to a lot of sort of myths and misunderstandings about what predictive maintenance is and how it can impact. So surely that probably contributes into this as well. But when they think they're getting one thing and it turns out, that's something completely irrelevant to what we're trying to achieve.
No, absolutely, Niall. There's no doubt that there is a lot of confusion, out there in the marketplace around, what you can and can't do with data, and indeed how you can and cannot collect data. And you see different approaches to solving this problem. Every trade show I go to, I will see the sensor-led solutions to predictive maintenance, where you've got a single sensor that you mount on a single asset, and it sends it to a specific cloud platform to look at that data set. And those they have a part to play in my mind in some applications, but in a lot of ways, people are deploying those because they're not joining up cross-functionally around to what role industrial data plays in the corporate strategy. I'm going to go back to that strategy piece again, because actually, if you look at this from a strategic perspective, you'd actually say, in order to deliver my brand strategy, I need to drive availability. That's not just a job of the maintenance function, it's a job of operations, but it's also a job of the IT function as well. But actually, you see in so many places there's a disconnect between the operational technology guys sitting inside the factory wall and the IT guys sitting outside the factory wall. And therefore, you never actually develop an integrated data platform, an integrated data approach that allows you to take all the relevant information you need from all the different systems and feed that into the appropriate platform. And what happens is the operational guys, the on-site guys, use shortcuts and standalone systems that don't sit as part of an overarching data strategy. So not only does your entire asset management approach need to sit as part of a corporate strategy, within that asset management approach, there should be a data strategy that sits in there as well. You'll have got a spare part management strategy, you've got a condition monitoring strategy, you might have got a lubrication strategy, etc. But data needs to be a strategic decision as well, and bringing together the IT view of data and the OT of data, the OT view of data as well. And once you bring those into a strategy, then it allows you to say, right, now let's look at the right data management approach.
And I'd also say it's important, cross organisation. When we work with global organisations with plants all over the world, because it's often there might be global IT, of course, but then each plant has their own sort of individual approach to data or culture or readiness for technology, etc. Do you see that as part of the or how do you see that as part of this overall mindset?
What I see in a lot of organisations, big and small, is that big disconnect between the operational technology and the informational technology worlds, and that for me is what in many ways stops businesses approaching the data side of predictive maintenance in a really coherent fashion. And in my previous life, when I was helping businesses deploy industrial IoT solutions, often we were acting as the broker between the OT and the IT worlds. We were the ones facilitating that conversation and getting it going, rather than seeing a really good working relationship, on the ground between the people who build the infrastructure for data and the people who create the need for data. And that again is a culture. That's another reason why, predictive maintenance is a way of life, because actually, if people were recognizing the importance of that cross-functional collaboration with their colleagues in IT and security, then good things would happen.
No, exactly. And I guess it's a story that's been played for a long, long time. And you mentioned at the start about predictive maintenance being an approach, long before technology. But again, it's those two. There's still more work to do, I guess, on a broad, looking broadly on that, bringing those two very important stakeholders together. Groups.
Yeah, and the businesses where I see, really great progress in terms of, using data to drive predictive maintenance at scale are the ones who've got, a strong engineering leadership running a really robust maintenance function, but combined with really good collaborative relationships between, the operational technology and the information technology teams.
Yeah, and I guess we've spoken a lot about the cultural. Cultural things that people, organisations need to think about, and you mentioned data as well, which is an important component. But if we look at it, look on the the positive side as well. So, hopefully after some introspection within the organisation, they've developed this culture and stuff. But what are the signals that you look out for, Richard? That these guys really are on it and really know. Have the strategy and know what they're doing and know how to approach, deploying technology at scale in their organisation.
I mean, if you look into this from a shop floor perspective, starting off on the shop floor perspective, we've all been to factories where we've seen great stuff happening in terms of the basics of lean manufacturing. If you're going somewhere where, the workplace is clean and tidy with a strong level of 5S, where there's, good engagement with, between operations and maintenance on the shop floor, where, the fundamentals of autonomous maintenance are being done well, and the spares part warehouse is well organised, and easy to find. Then you've got all the fundamentals that are in place within inside the factory to make this go well. And then the stuff that's more intangible, the stuff that you're not going to see with your eyes, but is equally as important, is that working with the central functions. How often do you pick up the phone to your colleagues in cybersecurity and IT to understand their world?
Yeah, and also so it's not whether it's a cultural thing, but there's not little projects going on. I mean, that's an IT nightmare, isn't it? Where little projects and little software is being tested under the radar, shadow IT, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a security professional and you come into the factory and discover there's 1,000,001 cottage industries of connecting the assets to the internet, then it's easy for you to assume the situation's out of control. And therefore you clamp down and you stop innovation. Whereas actually, if those experiments are being done, in collaboration with IT and security, as again backed as part of a strategic approach, then you're going to get their support. I mean, these people are, the people I know in IT and security went in there because they're excited about technology, and actually, if you can engage them with how exciting this technology is, then my experience is it's quite easy to get them on board, because they become excited about the power of data, as well as you as a maintenance professional.
No, exactly. I mean, maybe that's sometimes a misalignment, with IT teams thinking that they're innovators too. They want to use the best technology. They want technology that meets certain requirements, obviously corporate requirements, but they also want, if there's a technology that can really push the organisation much further forward on their digital transformation journey, then they're going to be open to that. But there's just certain parameters they have to think about, of course.
Yeah, precisely. And they'll look at it, in the same way that us as maintenance professionals will think about, Lola and Pure, and pressure system safety regulations as fundamental to our day job. People in IT will be thinking about their respective standards and legislation as fundamental to their job. What we need to do is help everybody to understand why these standards and regulations are important, and get a joint approach to managing the risks associated with them, and then you get engagement between functions.
And sort of go down a slightly different track. So with once predictive maintenance and technology is deployed, we know as Senseye that's just sort of the beginning of the journey in terms of working with customers to ensure they're seeing success. They're promoting that internally, and they're continuing the momentum. It's keeping momentum, I guess, is a really important part of it. But like with any technology, and there's lots of distractions. I guess something else will come along, and a new project or something, or a new distraction will come along. But how do you keep teams sort of focused on predictive maintenance and the benefits it brings to continue the momentum and keep growing and keep being successful over time?
Constant evangelism, and constantly celebrating the successes. It's a change program, and you've got to think about the fundamentals of change management. Of that, constantly keeping people involved, constantly celebrating the small wins, and constantly painting the vision of where we need to go next. You've got to keep your eye on the ball of doing the basics well. So once you've put your predictive maintenance tool in, and you've got people responding to facts and data, then you need to build that into your daily life, build it into your management control systems, that actually we now respond to data rather than opinions. The minute you start to say, I don't really care what the predictive maintenance platform says, let's go and take it apart and find out where it's not broken yet. Then you've lost it. Then you're going back and undermining the change you're trying to see.
And I guess from your perspective, Rich, what role does I'm speaking, not Siemens, but any predictive maintenance sort of vendor, what's their sort of role in this deployment? How do they support? Should they support customers? Shall I say?
Absolutely. I mean, you as a vendor, or indeed any other vendor, will have got examples of where their technology is being deployed to brilliant effect, and where the technology is being deployed to less brilliant effect. Now, the common factor is the technology. So actually, what a software provider's role is to say, right, if you want to get the best out of this technology investment, the way you need to behave, Mr. Customer, is X, Y, Z. The right way to interact with this platform is this. Because a software vendor has seen this time and time again. The customer's doing it for the first time. So the software vendor is there to really lead the customer to value, to show what they need to, what the customer needs to do in order to extract the maximum possible value out of the software platform. And it's the vendor that's going to know that, because they're the ones who've seen the success stories, and probably also seen the pain of customers that haven't extracted the most value out of it.
And it's interesting we sort of talk about value as well, because value comes in many different forms, and obviously that's from understanding a customer's own sort of circumstances and the goals they want to achieve. Typically there's a lot of talk of reducing downtime and increasing maintenance productivity and this kind of thing. But more and more, I've been talking to colleagues on the podcast who are talking to customers. There was a customer recently who was talking about health and safety, and we know that's priceless. But in terms of there's sometimes a bit of an obsession with downtime. That's not always applicable to every single organisation. But so I guess what I'm saying, I guess it feeds into your point about aligning with the corporate strategy again, because sustainability is a key part of that, health and safety and other metrics. But do you see what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you're looking at from predictive maintenance from a water company perspective, then clearly managing your uncontrolled releases of untreated water into the watercourse is going to be a really important thing to do. Whereas if you're a brewer, then making sure stock availability during the run up to Christmas is the most important thing. So different businesses will have got different strategic drivers that will change the focus of how to use some of these tools. The tools are the same, but actually it's the focus of how you use the tools that's driven by those corporate objectives.
Yeah, I was just writing down there that phrase, different strategic drivers, because it almost sums up our conversation quite well, and it explains why you can't just apply technology, take a platform and just apply it, without thinking of the context or the,
Yeah.
and the cultural, considerations. I think that was just a nice way you sort of summarise that then.
Thank you. And actually, as maintenance people, we're used to working with criticality. It drives everything. And for me, the same mindset of saying, not all initiatives are equal in the same way that not all assets are equal. The ones that are more closely aligned to the corporate strategy, those are the critical initiatives. And the ones that, there'll be, other stuff happening, but if it's not, laser aligned with the corporate strategy, then you should be putting less resource into it.
No, and that's a really good way to summarise it. Again, it's like you've done this before, Richard.
It's almost like I've done this before. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I've spoken to lots of organisations, exactly.
Yeah.
But I guess as we come sort of towards the end, I guess the real question, and we like to sort of end, well, as you know, because you've been on multiple times, but we like to end on sort of key takeaways. So if people are just starting to think about predictive maintenance and are now sort of considering this, this cultural aspect they really need to think about, where would you suggest to get started? There's no quick fixes, as you said. There's no magic wand, but what's some initiatives people can start thinking about, or at least some things they can start thinking about to get started?
Yeah, I think there's a top down and a bottom up, approach to this, Niall. From the bottom up, it is about getting those fundamentals right and making sure that you're moving away from a reactive culture. You're investing time in structured problem solving, and you're starting to find why things are failing and then put long-term solves in place to stop them happening, and rewarding the unsung heroes who stop the failure, rather than the supermen who parachute in, when everything's on fire, and bringing that area, that aura of calm to your factory rather than aura of firefighting. From a top-down perspective, I would recommend that people, get their heads around the principles of ISO 55001. Accreditation is not for everybody, and I'm not saying that everybody should rush out and get themselves accredited. But actually, the concept of having a strategic asset management plan that drives all your maintenance, all your asset management activity, for me is fundamental. And if I look back in my career, the times we had great success of getting investment, either OPEX or CAPEX, out of the business, is the times when we had our engineering, maintenance and CAPEX, plans were laser aligned with the corporate ones. The times we got kicked into the long grass is where we were just saying, I need more money because I want more money.
Yeah. Or what's more probably common today is, we've got some budget for Gen AI. Let's just find some technology as Gen AI.
Let's just spend money on tech as opposed to solving a problem that needs solving. And then I think my third takeaway, so bottom up, fundamentals of lean manufacturing, top down, apply the principles of ISO 55000 and one. And then my third takeaway would be, if you're sitting in a listed company, go and read your corporate strategy. Go and read your annual report and your corporate strategy documents, because that will tell you what the business wants to achieve. And your job as a maintenance professional is to support that corporate strategy.
Yeah, and ultimately that will assist in very, very much in getting buy-in, from the stakeholders at that level, of course. Exactly. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, precisely. Getting buy-in, getting support, getting money. And getting resources from other parts of the business.
Absolutely. But yeah, so I think we've covered everything very well today, Richard. I just wanted to sort of end. You mentioned your sort of shifting sort of career, and out on your own, as it were. But if people wanted to find out more about what you're doing at the moment and just more information about what you offer, what you're offering to clients, where's the best place to find out about that?
I've recently launched my new website, two6.co.uk. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. And so if you're looking at, how do I, build a data strategy? How do I, have asset management as part of my corporate strategy? Please do reach out.
Fantastic. And we'll put both of those links in the show notes so people can access those
Excellent.
nice and easily.
Thanks so much.
But yes, for today, thank you again, Richard. Was it the fourth time or the third time?
Third time. Third time, plus a few impromptu conversations at trade shows as well, Niall.
Exactly. Oh, of course. But yeah, third time lucky, I hope. And we'll definitely invite you back again if you'd like to be part of the show again. But no, thank you for your time and sharing your expertise once again with our listeners. And thank you everyone out there for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.